Hey everybody, welcome to In the Red Zone. Michael Johnson here with you, and it is time to reveal the Red Zone top 25 leading into Week 11 for college football. A lot of shakeup in Week 10, a lot of upsets. But hey, before we get started, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and always leave your comment. Love to hear what you think of this top 25. And right now, go over and visit busr.com/redzone, and if you bet $50, they'll give you $50, and this is only for Red Zone fans using promo code RedZone. So go over there right now. It's limited. It's a 1-week offer. Go bet $50, play with BUSR, and get a free $50. Take advantage of that. Okay, it is time to reveal the top 25. The first playoff rankings came out. We all know what those are. There's going to be a shakeup this week. Michigan State got beat. Tennessee beat Kentucky. Wake Forest lost. Several other teams struggled. Alabama squeaks by LSU. Oregon gets by Washington. Cincinnati struggled. So big shakeup in my top 25 this week. And let's take a look at that right now. Here is my Red Zone top 25 leading into Week 11. This graphic available on our Instagram and our Twitter page. You can go there and grab this and look at it further if you want to. But let's take a look at the top 25. Let's start with number 1. Georgia stays number 1. They do beat Missouri even though they did not cover the spread. That is something that I use as somewhat of a gauge when I'm setting the top 25 because the spread is based on the FPI, how good a team should be, and whether or not they can beat the spread or cover a spread is usually indicative of how good they are. This is the first time that I can think of in a while that Georgia hasn't covered the spread, and it was surprising because it was Missouri. But nonetheless, Georgia undefeated. It is a pretty solid win. They stay at number 1. Ohio State is at number 2. They got the win this past week over Nebraska. Somewhat of a struggle for the Buckeyes, but nonetheless, they got the win. It is now a comparable win to Oklahoma because Oklahoma played Nebraska. They kind of struggled. Nebraska they've played a lot of top teams, and the games have been very close. So Nebraska maybe next year will turn that corner. But for now, there's a comparable one. I know Ohio State has the loss to Oregon, but they've been playing really solid, and really other teams have started to struggle. And when you just compare and you think about who can beat who, this just makes the most sense for me for Ohio State to be number 2, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm an Ohio State fan. I just think this is where it fits. At number 3 is Oklahoma. Process of elimination. Oklahoma's still undefeated. They had a bye week. They're 9-0. But teams ahead of them lost, like Michigan State. Oregon struggled with Washington at this point. Where does Oklahoma fit? Do they beat the teams behind them? Caleb Williams has been playing, pretty remarkable, even though that Sooner defense is lackluster. And I think even if they would happen to get in the playoffs, I don't think they can win a playoff game because the defense is so bad. But the offense can keep them in it right now. I don't think they would beat Ohio State because of their defense. But it would be a close game. I do think they would beat the teams behind them, at least immediately behind them. And so let's take a look. Number 4 is Alabama. They struggled with LSU. They lost to a 2-loss Texas A&M earlier this year. And they're just not the dominant Alabama that we're used to seeing. Now, the playoff committee still has them at number 2, which I think is ridiculous. But nonetheless, they are a top 5 team. I have them just outside, or taking the 4th spot, actually, if the playoffs were to happen today. Behind them is Cincinnati. Cincinnati, for the 3rd week in a row, struggled against a team that they should be dominating. They beat Tulsa 28-20, but the reality is Tulsa should have tied that game if it wasn't for the fumble at the end. This is now 3 weeks in a row, and I just can't put Cincinnati in the top 4 anymore. They dropped despite the win. They're still undefeated. Now, if Ohio State were to lose, Oklahoma loses, just with everybody losing by process of elimination, if they're undefeated at the end of the year and some of these other teams lose, they have to be in. They just have to be in. You can't keep them out. But right now, given the way they've played in the last 3 weeks, they should be out there beating these teams 42-7, 42-10, and they're just not doing it. So I don't think Cincinnati at this point right now is a playoff team. Notre Dame comes in at 6. They played Navy. Cincinnati beat Navy by 7. Notre Dame goes out and handles Navy. So, but, the difference here is the head-to-head. Cincinnati beat Notre Dame in South Bend. That has to count for something. So Cincinnati stays ahead of Notre Dame, but Notre Dame, the Irish, they are moving up right now. Every win a little bit more impressive. You have Oregon at 7. They struggled with Washington. They did get, I believe, a 10-point win, but Oregon just hasn't looked good. I know the playoff committee has them in there at 4. I can't put them there. I mean, Washington was 4-4. They lost to a 3-6 Stanford, who just got humiliated this past weekend. And I just don't think Oregon is one of the top 4 teams. I think they are, where I have them at 7 is where they should be. And same deal with them as with Cincinnati. They're just not going out and beating teams like they should for a team that the playoff committee says is the 4th best team in the country. I don't see it, so I have them at 7. Michigan State, they lose to Purdue. They dropped to 8. I had them at number 2 last week. That's 6 drops. For Purdue, this is the second top 5 win. It's just something they tend to do is knock off teams. Purdue gets Ohio State this next week. That passing offense is going to be problems for the Buckeyes. It really is, because the Buckeye secondary is the big weakness on that defense. So that's going to be an intriguing matchup. You'll have to tune in on Monday to see our predictions, see what we, how we break that down and who we pick in that game. Michigan comes in at 9. They're only lost to Michigan State. And they got the win over Indiana this past weekend. So they're at 9. Oklahoma State moves up from 11 to 10. And this is by the process of Wake Forest losing. So, Oklahoma State gets a win this week. They still only have the 1 loss. So they are number 10 in my opinion. And then let's just briefly go through the next. Texas A&M gets a win over Auburn. They're at 11. Louisiana still only 1 loss. They are up there at 12. Ole Miss at 13. Houston at 14. BYU is up to 15. Purdue with the 2 big wins. Purdue, even with 3 losses, to me, just by the huge wins they've had, they are up there at 16 and moving up. And if they can beat Ohio State next week, I would maybe even bump them up as high as 10, because that would be pretty impressive to have 3 top 5 wins in the season despite the 3 losses. Auburn at 17 after the loss to Texas A&M. Wake Forest drops from 10 to 18. Wisconsin comes in there after their win. Penn State at 20. They beat Maryland in a close game there. UTSA still undefeated. Arkansas jumps in at 22. Kentucky falls to 23 after the loss to Tennessee. Baylor comes in at 24 after their loss to TCU. And at 25 is NC State. Now, if you didn't see your team in the top 25, listen, from 16 down, from 16 to 30, you could mix and match and move anybody around you want, because they're all kind of at the same level, in my opinion. Utah is just on the fringe looking in. Last week I had Minnesota. They lost to Illinois, so they're out. Excuse me. So this is my top 25 going into Week 11 for college football. Tuesday night, second release of the playoff rankings. I mean, the playoff committee flat out got it wrong the first week. There's just no other way to say it. I mean, everybody sees it. It's amazing that they have Alabama at 2 and Oregon at 4. I don't see it. So I think, to me, I've said before, I think there's a lot of corruption with this playoff committee, having these 13 guys decide who the best teams are. They have vested interests, so they're not going to be objective. I don't care how they try to say they are. They're not. They're not objective. If you want objective rankings, you need objective people who are outside, who aren't university ADs, who aren't trying to think about their conference. I mean, it's just, there's nothing fair about the way this works. I mean, if you saw there is a site out there still puts out BCS rankings every week, and how the rankings would fall if we used BCS rankings, which are based on computer points, strength of schedule. It's a heck of a lot more unbiased than a playoff committee. That committee had Georgia number 1, Cincinnati number 2, Oklahoma number 3, and Alabama number 4, if we kept the BCS rankings for that first week. So I think that's more fair than this playoff committee. I would like to get rid of the playoff committee altogether. I just think it's a sham, it's a fraud, it's corruption at its highest level of college football. There's nothing good about it. But anyway, this is my top 25 moving into Week 11. Again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed. Please like the video. Go leave your comment. What do you think of the top 25? And then also take advantage of our sponsor, busr.com/RedZone. Promo this week just for RedZone fans. Bet $50 and get $50 using promo code RedZone. So go check that out, busr.com/RedZone. RedZone. It's only good for a week. Hey guys, that's all I have for this week. Let's move on to week 11. Probably going to be some more upsets, but we'll see. I'll see you next time. Take care.